I'm happy to welcome all of us here to the second round of the Creative Aging Initiative. The first one was about a month ago. I think we had, as I described at the outset of that, it was initially born of Ashby Village's 10th anniversary celebration and wanting to recognize and honor and also invite increased engagement with creative expression because it has been a really essential part of our village and of each of our lives as we've grown older, and have found that recognizing and embracing our creative selves in all of its different forms of use, through the arts, through cooking, through dancing, through any number of modalities, all the modalities of living, has just really been a vitalizing way of aging well. So we're excited today to have our second gathering. The first was presentations by several of the members and volunteers of our village who have been meeting for the last 6 months, looking at how we could bring the creative expression to this 10th anniversary. And those several of those people, so I'll introduce them briefly. Barbie Jo Stim, Pat Sakai, Peter Sussman, Russ Ellis, and Nancy Rubin. We also had Lisa Escherich, who had been participating in the group and forming it, and she has stepped back from the leadership or the visioning of how it's unfolding, but want to recognize her. And so today we had last time presentations, discussions of how creative expression had been part of our lives and our aging process, and created the different ways that these members, volunteers, have used them. We shared that and introduced the goal or the challenge that we were inviting participants and anyone in our community to see this moment of sheltering in place as a specific opportunity for us to explore parts of ourselves that we might be actively engaged in or might be interested in engaging in, different curiosities or interests in art or self-expression that we haven't done before but have maybe imagined. So today we're turning it back. We're calling this the Your Turn, and what we're planning to do today is to gather together, and we're going to create small groups, breakout groups, and Suyin will introduce how that's going to happen. And we'll have groups of probably, looking at the number of people, 32. There'll probably be 6 or 7 in a group. We're going to break out into 5 groups, and we'll there's a series of questions, lead questions, which are going to invite each of each of us as participants to explore a little bit about what draws us here, what types of creative expression we're interested in exploring, and then also to go a little deeper into how we might be able to live that out in the next period of time. We are at some point we had been envisioning, and I think still are, there being an opportunity for sharing our creative expressions sometime in a public forum, and we'll see if that's in person or on YouTube, but that'll be sometime in the future. So that's the goal for today. Before we go, I want to just recognize 2 people who have helped to support the process along the way. Flo Raskin, from the very beginning, had been supporting, taking minutes and following up with the participants. And Arlene Reiff, who was at the first gathering, has stepped into that role and is supporting this effort moving forward. So I would like to, again, so we're going to break out into groups. The group leaders will be leading the conversation Some might be asking for participants to, a participant to take notes and to report back. Some might not. They'll take the lead there. And then we'll have, how much time, Suyin, were we talking about?
45 minutes.
45 minutes. So a real nice chunk of time for people to be talking with one another and exploring. And then we're going to come back and there'll be a report out from one or more people from the different groups. And we'll then just see what's emerging and talk about next steps. So with that, I'll pass it over to Suyin to describe the breakout groups.
Great. Okay. Well, again, a huge welcome and congratulations to everyone. Our Zoom capacity as a community is so incredible and very exciting. And we're going to be trying this new tool that Zoom has. So it's going to allow us to move into smaller group discussions. So everyone has been assigned a group already. Each of our creativity initiative leaders are going to be in separate groups. There's 5 of them. I'm going to open the rooms and you have to do nothing. It might say, do you want to join? Do you want to go to your room? Hit yes and give it a little time and you will automatically be moved to a smaller group.
I should add that this is unrehearsed.
Unrehearsed, yes. So everyone fingers crossed, but it should work okay. Andy and I might pop in to make sure everything's going okay. And we have like a new person just joined, so we might join additional participants as they come on. But right now we have 6 people in each group and I'm going to start them now. So you should see something that says, come and join. And then it'll pull you back automatically in 45 minutes.
Stopping the recording. Yes?
Yes.
Everyone's here.
Everyone is here.
Scroll to the next
Oh,
group
oh,
here.
I see. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Welcome back. It seems like it was successful. I'm looking forward to hearing about the conversations. But all the groups went out. There were a couple people who got left behind and we redirected, but everyone was out there. So welcome back. And we're going to take some time now until we'll probably take 20 minutes to hear from one another and to note any strong visions, ideas, next steps, and to identify some of that and then to wind down. So I would like to invite, I guess, Russ, your group was the first one that came back. Would you like to begin, or whomever in your group had gathered the thoughts, comments to?
Sure, I have, and one of our participants just really made my presentation very easy. Roughly, a couple of the members had a really strong interest in photography. Let me say first that we were thanked for our last session and offering this opportunity. And every member that in my group is interested in pursuing some work in the context of Ashby Village activities. So that's good. But a couple of members have very strong interest in photography, although it is more expansive than that. But I told them they were in good shape because we've got good photographers doing great work. So that was a good thing. People did describe their works in other areas. We spent some time comparing Ashby Village to Ollie. There was a theme that was sort of interesting to me, which was about, how to call it, creative reading. One of the members talked about reading a book that was way over her head and imagining being in a group with an expert, like a retired professor or something like that, to come in a group and help analyze and understand this reading. And we actually spent a little time talking about that. Actually reading as a creative activity, I guess is the best way to put it. Anyway, I think I'm not leaving a lot out. One of the comments early on was one of the members said she'd like to be into something without worrying about how good it was or the judgment of it. And so in summary, of what our conversation was about, Steve proposed at my urging that a group be exploration without judgment. And I think that's a really strong title for something somewhere that we're doing. Exploration that's open, unfettered, unjudged, where you get to express yourself or receive some kind of information. The other thing is there is real strong interest in interest groups or clubs in Ashby Village. So people, for example, could wander among them. One of our members has a strong creative urge, doesn't know where to put it. Another member has strong creative urge and does it all and wanders around. So clubs could be a great thing. That's it.
Great. Okay, so just to take I guess we'll go around and then we'll have a chance to hear anything that might have been missed, etc. So what of the other facilitators would like to go next? Whom? Peter, I saw you.
I'm going to turn it over in a second to Judith, who's going to be the reporter from our group. But I just want to say that was a very exciting discussion, I thought. I think
Yeah.
no, our group really was grappling with how you encourage individual passions in a group setting. You know, how a group can help individuals find their creative outlets. And I thought it was the ideas that arose from it were very challenging, imaginative, and wonderful. So Judith is the official reporter. I'm going to turn it over to her, Judith Coates.
Hi.
Let me just also, excuse me one second. Let me also add that she brings an added perspective because she's been involved with North Oakland. And so she brings another lens on this. Go ahead, Judith.
Okay, well, as you said, our question really was, how can a group facilitate individual expression? And we had, kind of similar ideas to what I think Steve, the first person, said. We want to be able to meet with other people who have similar interests so that Ashby Village can facilitate these gatherings, or finding people who love photography, or we have a singer songwriter in our group. She would love to meet maybe people who would be interested in collaborating on a show, maybe helping to write a book for the show. So meeting with people who have other similar interests. And one of the points that was really important was, and again, this is a repeat, but the idea of safety, that you want to be in a place where you feel safe. As someone said very eloquently, that art is showing your soul, and you want to feel that your soul is safe. So it's not a place to be critiqued. It's a place to blossom and to share. We did have one member, Lisa, I'm going to say your name. She said that she could teach a class. So teaching classes is wonderful. She could teach a class in drawing. It was one of the things that we discovered at North Oakland Village, because we have tried encouraging creativity. And the more structured and specific a group is, the more people will come. To just put out a bunch of stuff and say, come play. People are very intimidated. And again, that safety needs to be there. So we had great ideas about meeting and connecting with other people with similar ideas. Also, having a format where you can bring it back to the village, whether it's a show of art, or a singing show that's put on, or maybe even a play reading that's done at a group. And of course, a lot of this is going to, it has to be facilitated around Zoom at this point. So I think those were our main ideas. I will just mention people like the idea. I have a little project with my granddaughter, and we can certainly encourage people to do this, where we're doing a joint painting. So one of us started it and sent it to the other, and she added on, and then she sends it back, and we're going to keep doing it until either it's a horrible mess or we decide it's really beautiful. But that's another kind of small project.
Let me add to that a very specific idea that came out of this is a kind of show and tell that when Judith mentioned that people bring some of their artworks to their normal
Potluck.
dinners. If just we had a program on something else and it incorporated, one of the group's interests and just showcased for a larger group what those individuals were working on. I thought that was an interesting idea. And the other one was just some kind of resource list, whether it, a kind of want ad almost thing. I don't know how it would be structured exactly, where people could feel out others who were interested in the same kind of collaboration and the same kind of form of expression. So that pretty much sums up our group.
Great. So Nancy, Pat, or Barbie Joe?
So first of all, Monica she did the reporting, so she's gonna be talking. But I feel like I just made 5 new friends. It was just wonderful being in this group setting together, and I think we all appreciated it. And so Monica will go ahead and give the report.
And feel free, Barbie, to jump in if I miss something.
I will, yeah.
I would say we had a very active group. Everyone had something to say, and in some cases very different. So it made for a lively discussion. The 3 questions were great. Why each of us decided to join the group. Number 2, what each of us would do to pursue our own creativity. And number 3, how Ashby Village can help each of us. Those are great questions, stimulated a lot of thought. And I would say the same themes came out of our answers that have already been identified, meaning this shelter in place has been an opportunity to explore our own creativity. Some of us feel we may not be able to do as much now because of less energy, fewer resources. Some of us had indicated that we'd like to find a creative path for ourselves because it's not something we've done in the past. Another person was wondering kind of what to do with the creative products that he has, hoping to publish it, maybe hoping to put together a blog. And let's see, in terms of how we plan to pursue these creative endeavors, some of the same ideas came up, either groups, small or large, either in person or virtual, classes, a show and tell of what we have created. In terms of how Ashby Village can help each of you, certainly various resources, in particular the developing a blog, finding ways of talking with each other, particularly people that we don't already know, either virtually or physically. And let's see. So overall, I guess I'll just summarize here. The variety of creative endeavors that people brought up were things like the performing arts, music, singing, certainly art, gardening, sewing, writing, drumming, dance. The barriers that came up were perhaps having less energy, feeling like we are our own worst critics, the inner critic idea, maybe limited support either from peers or perhaps Ashby Village. The benefits of being creative are that, well, it has given us some of us, more self-confidence to pursue these creative endeavors, something to focus on other than the coronavirus or politics. And creating something generally makes us feel better about ourselves. And lastly, I'd say that I feel that creative endeavors feed and nurture both the mind, the body, and the spirit. The mind, because it gives us a chance to use our brains to learn something new or perfect existing skills. There's a physical component to it in terms of pursuing endeavors, whether it be painting something or gardening or drumming. And also it feeds our spirit because it feeds both ourselves and others, and it feels good. So I think that's it. Anything you'd like to add, Barbie, or any other member of our group?
Yeah, you did a great job. Perfect.
Great, thanks.
Before we go on to the next, I feel very full. Like there's been a lot of stuff shared, a lot of similarities, so I want to just take a moment and either to close our eyes for a moment and take a breath, or do a stretch. We'll take about 30 seconds just to kind of get ready for the last 20 minutes of our chat. Let's just kind of, because we're, as many people have said, zoomed out.
Zoomed out.
Oh. Okay, one last moment. Okay. All right, so Pat and/or Nancy.
Okay, I'll start, and then I'm going to hand it over to Arlene. Are you still here with us, Arlene?
She's here.
Oh.
She'll be back.
Okay. Well, we had a very wide-ranging discussion, a very interesting and stimulating talk among all of us, and various people have done various things or that they would consider creative, and we spent quite a great deal of time on one member of our group who threw out a really provocative question, which is, what is this creativity? So we sort of started looking at whether the creative process necessarily has to result in a product, whether or not it has to be instinctive, non-analytical, whether or not, you would consider things like mathematic analysis or an analysis of a musical piece in which you discover something completely new and it changes your whole approach and how you hear that music, whether or not that is in fact creative. So that was one big, I think, aha that I think stimulated a lot of discussion. We actually ran out of time. I thought we were going to go right to 2, and we had time to talk about what Ashby Village could help to facilitate this whole process. And one of the things that came up was a facilitated writers group. And Susan in our group actually said she would be happy to help facilitate that. It's something that she's very interested in, among other things. But Arlene, you were taking lots of notes. Can you share some of the juicier bits of what we talked about?
Oh, let me just sort of check on that. I think you really captured the highlights, mainly the discussion we had about, well, what is creativity? And broadening the definition and the scope of that and how we view it, and not be judgmental about within ourselves about that. Then some people talked about what ways in which they are being creative now, with music or painting, collage, and also the issue about ways in which there have been some limitations now in terms of energy or physical conditions that have made some of the things that someone might want to do a little difficult, and then having to find the challenge of, okay, there may be other ways. And an example of that was when Sandra mentioned that she would love to do tie-dye, but isn't able to do that exactly now, but she thought creatively, perhaps she could find a way to paint it instead. So it was very inspiring to hear, different ways and approaches that people may have to express themselves creatively. Yeah, so that's what I pretty much took out of what you were saying, what we were saying in the group.
Would anybody from our group like to weigh in here about any additional perspectives that seemed really important or different than what's been expressed?
Everyone is muted, Pat. So
Yeah.
maybe
Okay.
once Nancy reports out, we can do a question,
All right.
more open question and answer.
I guess I would just say, as my takeaway as a discussion facilitator, I encourage us to think about how Ashby Village can support those people who may not be thinking about creativity in terms of your traditional arts and product-oriented things, but is there a way to celebrate and encourage and support endeavors of the imagination, of invention, that may not fall into those categories? So I just want to kind of put that into the mix here. Thank you.
Okay, we'll pass it over to you, Nancy, to have the final group, and then we'll have a little chance to wrap up.
Okay, before I turn it over to Craig, I thought we had a new category of creativity. The oldest member in our group said she had driven herself to get a wine barrel. And I thought, oh, someone wants to start a winemaking group. That would be great. But she's planting a lemon tree in it instead, which also should be fun. Craig, thank you for reporting back for our group. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, let's consult my notes here. So we went through a survey of the different interests that were represented in our group. And some of those interests were photography, writing, making art out of found objects, more photography, storytelling, and technology as far as a sort of a learning experience, and knitting. And those were the and a garage band. I'm a garage band guy. The next question was what would help us in our artistic endeavors here? Somebody mentioned that if Ashby Village could reach out to people that are not in the current Zoom and make generally available.
Uh-oh.
Craig, we've lost you.
That we, or Ashby Village, or the person hosting it can deliver on whatever it is that we're seeking to distribute. So, like, I don't know, if somebody's looking for collaborators on writing, is an example I'm coming up with. Can Ashby Village deliver on being able to support the people that would be interested in that kind of a group? And then somebody else mentioned celebrating the 10-year anniversary as some kind of a organizing principle around which some visual arts might be created. And we moved on to have you done anything creative while sheltering in place? Cooking was one mention. A wine cask for a lemon tree was another mention. One of the members said that her creativity had actually been diminished because of the shelter in place, and also because of the additional load on her time represented by technology, since the technology has been consuming people a lot more in sheltering in place. We can't have conversations anymore. We have to Zoom, and we have to FaceTime, and that kind of thing. Most creative thing you've ever done, I don't see anything under my notes for that, so I'm not exactly sure what happened to that. 5 things you love to do. Everybody wrote down their list, but we didn't share those lists. Let's see, if you haven't done anything for a while, why haven't you done it? Well, a lot of it is shelter in place, I guess. Irene missed one-on-one conversations, and that's and Elena missed travel, and those are both directly attributable to the fact that we have to maintain separation. And then Nancy was mentioning that even though she's a photographer, the photography teachers that that she has engaged in the past were not very inspiring, but it led her to, to teach herself and find other aspects of photography that had not been covered by her teachers, but led her on to being more involved in photography than maybe her uninspiring teachers would have prepared her for. So that's pretty much all the notes I have from our session.
Great.
And Andy, could I make one point?
Mm-hmm.
I was very taken by one suggestion someone was talking about in our group about cooking. And as she talked about cooking, she was talking a lot about the visual, about how beautiful the eggplant was with the, and the combinations. And that led me to think of ways in which whatever interest groups or we have or not, that they could collaborate across disciplines with each other, so that the cooking group could hook up with a photography group and do a kind of visual component of what they were working on. So I think there's a lot of, if we manage the resource listings and the communication, central communication with members, if we perfect ways of doing that, I think we can encourage a lot of this cross-discipline kind of creativity. It started right there in just hearing how visual her interest was in cooking.
Great. So I am we have 9 minutes left or 10 minutes left in our time together. I want to just try to summarize and to put out kind of make an invitation for any additions or thoughts about next steps and go on from there. So it sounded like this 40 minutes of conversation was very rich and fruitful for each of the groups. A lot of different visions, thoughts, sharings about creativity. And I think it was energizing just to even have a forum to be able to put our attention to sharing and exploring together. And it sounds like there's a real interest in this time and in general to continue to cultivate creative expression. And there being a lot of different ways that we can do that individually and maybe together. And there was definitely some expression of an interest in the possible formation of groups, the photography group in particular, a writing group, a couple other options. We've been tracking that. Arlene's been taking notes, and so those are being named and identified. And then there also was an interest in having some forum where we might be able to share with one another what's been happening. And that's certainly on the docket. So are there any other key points about kind of what came out in your conversations or what might be next that we might kind of put on the platter for consideration? It feels like this was the second and a very fruitful conversation. So there potentially can be a third, kind of digging down a little, using some of the thoughts that have emerged here. But before I go on, let me see if there's any other kind of items to add to that list of perhaps what people might be interested in having happen. I see Nancy's finger. Hi, Nancy. Can you? Yeah.
So for me, I'm looking maybe if I feel the energy. I've got 8 unpublished songs, and I went over them. They were good, but I don't have the energy to write the book for the show. And what could we have a list of people looking for collaborations?
Interesting
For
idea.
me, that would be really good.
Okay, that's a great idea. Judith Coates, I'm going to unmute you.
She has a show, she said.
I just wanted to ask a question of Lisa, who had said that she was willing to teach a class in drawing. Is that something you think could be done via Zoom, or is that something that you wouldn't feel comfortable with doing it that way?
That's what I'm not sure about. I don't know.
Okay.
I'd have to really think about it. Yeah. I'm more used to doing things in person.
Sure.
Yeah, so there's short and long-term opportunities. I mean, we're all going to see how this unfolds and whether we're going to be able to be with each other in any time soon. But obviously, we can track that as we move along.
Andy, you know, I was also very taken, and I don't think it was fully reflected in your summary, with the idea of integrating creativity and creative product into every one of our events, so that you might have a forum on leadership or whatever it is, anything, and do a little show and tell at the beginning, or do a, you know, include it in some way, a presentation to a larger group. So just integrate it into what we do otherwise, anyhow.
Yeah.
Not simply, you know, work towards some big show at the end in which everyone contributes, but allow the individual creative expression to have a showcase on a continuing basis.
Great idea.
Any other comments, thoughts? All right. Well, it seems like
Hey, you got one.
yeah, go on, Russ.
No, Julie, pad
Julie.
4 over here.
Julie, let's see. I'm not.
She needs to unmute
Pad
herself.
4, Julie.
She's unmuted. She needs to unmute. iPad 4, Julie.
I'm trying to unmute her. Julie, see if you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
There you go.
There she
Okay.
goes. Hey, Julie.
I think that what you did here, which was setting aside an appreciated time to show the value of exploring these ideas further, I think that's really important. And I think that's what came up as part of our last major meeting before this, when there was the end section of brainstorming that had some similarity, not exactly, but to show the value and the appreciation for opening the door to this work.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And Andy, I'd like to climb in just very quickly and emphasize what Steve summarized so well. That was a theme in our group, and that is exploration without excess judgment. The freedom to explore without worrying about good, bad, etc.
Great. So with that, the group that has been working together will reconvene. We're gonna we have a date already set in early June. If anyone on the call is interested and motivated to contribute, to be a part of that, you can, my email is probably the easiest, andy@ashbyvillage.org. You can just drop me a line and we'll get back to you. And we'll stay in touch about what's next and how things are unfolding, what groups that we want to initiate. But I think this is definitely the beginning for us collectively and us individually. So just as Russ said, encouragement to, you know, use the juice in the conversation today, bring it onto paper, bring it into your life, your work, try something different, try something new, and continue to live the exploration of creative being.
And give us your feedback. You know, it's not limited to what we did today. If you have some ideas for realizing the objectives we were talking about today, please send them to Andy or one of us, and we'll put it on the agenda.
Yeah, and we're gonna get an email address for creative aging, so it's not coming all through me. So anyway, best of all, everyone, stay safe, be healthy, be well, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.